Chapter 1. Controlled Variables. Ryan Davis preferred systems that behaved predictably. He liked code because it responded to logic. Input led to output. Problems had identifiable causes. Solutions could be tested, refined, and deployed with measurable success. There was a quiet satisfaction in knowing that a system, once optimized, would continue to perform exactly as intended. People, on the other hand, had no such guarantees. He leaned back in his chair, staring at the dozens of diagnostic panels spread across his monitors. Data scrolled past in tightly packed columns, latency readings, AI response timing, server load balancing, neural interpretation delays. Every number told a story, and all of them pointed to the same infuriating conclusion. There's still a delay spike when two linked AIs try to process voice commands simultaneously, said Mark from across the room, his tone carrying the subtle strain of someone who had said variations of that sentence too many times. Ryan didn't look away from the screen. I can see that. It's worse when spatial audio kicks in, added Priya, swiveling slightly in her chair. The handoff between systems isn't clean. It's like they're arguing. They're not arguing, Ryan muttered. They're desensing. Feels like arguing, Jared said, raising a cup of coffee that had long since gone cold. Like one AI says turn left, and the other goes no, absolutely not. And then everything falls apart. Ryan finally turned, resting his elbows on the desk. They're not independent. They're supposed to be cooperative instances of the same framework. Their information sharing protocol is identical. Then why does it break the moment two users link up? Priya asked. Ryan didn't answer right away, because he didn't have a better answer than the one he'd been circling for weeks. It's a concurrency issue in behavior mapping, he said finally. Something in the way each AI prioritizes its users' input conflicts during synchronization. Mark groaned lightly. We've already isolated that layer though. Then we missed something. There was a silence that followed, the kind that settled over a team that knew they were running out of time without saying it out loud. Ryan exhaled slowly, turning back to his screens. Run another simulation pass. Increase user variability parameters. I want more erratic input patterns. More chaos, Jared said. More realism, Ryan corrected. A soft knock at the glass wall of the conference room interrupted the flow of conversation. The team's collective attention shifted as the door opened. Claire, the project coordinator, stepped in, her expression carrying the familiar blend of urgency and optimism that defined her role. Sorry to interrupt. Ryan stood slightly, reflexive. What's up? We've got someone new joining today, she said, stepping aside. Transferred from the behavioral AI division. Ryan's brow furrowed. Now? I know, Claire said quickly. But she's been working on conversational sync models. Leadership thinks she might have insight. That didn't immediately reassure him. Still, he nodded once. All right. Claire turned toward the doorway. Elena, come on in. Ryan's first impression wasn't what he expected. Elena Morales didn't look intimidated. That was unusual. Most people, when stepping into a high-pressure environment mid-project, carried at least a hint of hesitation. A subtle awareness that they were entering something already in motion. Elena walked in like she'd been part of the motion the entire time. Hi, she said easily, offering a quick smile to the room before her gaze landed on Ryan. You must be the one losing sleep over this. Ryan blinked once. I prefer to call it prioritizing. Of course you do. A few quiet chuckles rippled through the room. Ryan straightened slightly. Ryan Davis, team lead. Elena Morales, she said, extending a hand. Her grip was firm, confident but not forceful. He released it quickly. Claire clapped her hands lightly. All right, I'll let you all get settled. Ryan, maybe you can bring Elena up to speed. Sure. Claire exited, leaving behind a subtle shift in energy that lingered in the room. Ryan gestured toward an open workstation. You can set up there. Elena nodded, setting her bag down before glancing at the screens. Her eyes moved quickly, not scanning but processing. What's breaking? She asked. AI synchronization under linked user conditions, Ryan said, specifically during simultaneous voice input and spatial feedback. She tilted her head slightly. And you've ruled out hardware limitations. It's not hardware. Then it's communication priority. Ryan hesitated. We've analyzed priority queues, he said. They're consistent. She shook her head once. Not system priority. User priority. That's the same thing. It's not, she said simply. The room went quiet again, but this time it felt different. Ryan crossed his arms. Explain. Elena leaned lightly against the edge of the desk. Your AI treats every user input as equally valid within its own instance, right? Yes. So when two AIs link, they each still think their user is the center of the system. That's by design, Ryan said. The system merges perspectives through shared context, without redefining hierarchy, she finished. Ryan frowned. There isn't supposed to be hierarchy. There always is, she said, her tone calm. In code, maybe not. In behavior, absolutely. Even in conversation, people adjust. They pause, defer, respond. Your AI isn't doing that, it's asserting. Jared leaned forward slightly. So the AIs are interrupting each other? Elena smiled faintly, more like refusing to listen. Ryan shook his head. That doesn't explain the latency. It does if both AIs are trying to reconcile conflicting authoritative inputs at the same time. He paused. Because that was new. We've been treating the sync issue as a data bottleneck, Priya said slowly. And it might be a behavioral loop, Elena replied. Ryan exhaled through his nose, turning back to the screens. That's a theory. It's a better one than assuming your system is perfect, she said. He glanced at her. There it was again, that lack of hesitation. Not arrogance, just certainty. I don't assume it's perfect, he said evenly. I assume it's fixable. Good, Elena said. Then let's fix the right thing. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The rest of the team watched quietly, sensing something forming. Not conflict, not agreement, but something in between. Ryan turned back to his console, pulling up a new diagnostics view. All right, we test it your way. Elena arched an eyebrow. That was fast. We don't have time to be stubborn. Her smile returned, a little sharper this time. I think you might. Ryan glanced at her again. What's that supposed to mean? Nothing, she said lightly, taking her seat. Just an observation. He frowned slightly, but didn't press further. Instead, he focused on the code. Because code made sense. It behaved predictably. It never surprised him. Not like people. And definitely not like Elena Morales. Chapter 2, Unexpected Variables. Ryan did not like changing variables mid-experiment. He could tolerate it, of course, that was part of the job, but tolerating something and trusting it were two very different things. And right now, as he watched a fresh simulation compile under Elena's suggested parameters, he found himself leaning more toward tolerance than trust. Run begins in 5 seconds, Priya announced, tapping a key with a subtle flourish that suggested both fatigue and determination. Ryan folded his arms again, though he suspected he'd been doing that too often lately. It was a defensive posture, or so someone had once told him. He hadn't bothered confirming it. Across the room, Elena sat angled toward her monitor. One leg tucked slightly under her chair, posture relaxed in a way that felt almost deliberate. She didn't look tense. She didn't look concerned. If anything, she seemed curious. Ryan didn't understand how she could be curious at a time like this. Simulation initializing, Jared said. A cascade of data lit up the main display. The virtual environment formed in real time. 2 avatars standing at the edge of a sprawling valley. Wind-stirring digital grass that shimmered in the artificial light of a perfectly rendered sky. User input enabled, Mark said. Voice channels active. Ryan's eyes moved to the latency panel. Numbers flickered, shifted, held steady. Then, link established, Priya said. The avatars stepped closer together. Test dialogue input, she added, clearing her throat. Move forward and scan terrain. The first AI processed the command almost instantly. The avatar took a step forward, head tilting as though surveying the horizon. Ryan's gaze sharpened. Second input, Jared said. Check inventory and mark nearest waypoint. The second AI responded. And for a moment, everything seemed fine. No spike. No disruption. Ryan leaned slightly closer to the screen. Keep going, he said quietly. Elena glanced at him, a hint of something unreadable flickering in her expression, then turned back to the display. Layer simultaneous commands, she suggested. Priya nodded. Advance and identify threats. Jared immediately followed. Set defensive stance and map escape route. The result should have triggered the issue. By now, the system would usually be struggling, both AIs competing for processing, the sync tearing apart at the seams. Instead, the avatars paused briefly, just a fraction of a second. Then both actions executed smoothly. Ryan straightened. Run it again, he said. They did. Same commands. Same result. Again. Again. Each time, the delay remained minimal, within acceptable thresholds. Jared let out a low whistle. That's new. Priya leaned forward, her eyes bright with cautious excitement. The conflict resolution layer is actually working. Ryan didn't respond immediately, because it wasn't just working. It was adapting. Look at the prioritization, Elena said, gesturing lightly at the data. Each AI is deferring where it makes sense. They're negotiating. Ryan narrowed his eyes. They're recalibrating authority. Exactly, she said, as if this had been obvious the entire time. Mark pushed back in his chair, running a hand through his hair. So instead of both AIs trying to be in charge, they're sharing control? More like trading it, Elena replied. Moment to moment. Ryan turned toward her. That creates unpredictability, he said. It creates flexibility. It creates inconsistency. It creates realism. The 2 words settled between them. The room had gone quiet again, but this time it carried a different weight. Less tension, more attention. Ryan held her gaze for a second longer than necessary before looking back at the screen. Log everything, he said. We need full data analysis before we assume this is stable. Of course, Elena said lightly. Wouldn't want to celebrate prematurely. He ignored the subtle edge in her tone. They spent the next hour running variations, different command structures, increased user interference, layered audio complexity. Each time, the system held. Not perfectly, but significantly better than before. By the end of it, even Ryan couldn't deny the improvement. This could actually fix it, Priya said, leaning back with a slow exhale. Like, fully fix it. It's not fixed yet, Ryan said automatically. No, she agreed. But it's the first time it feels like it could be. That was harder to argue with. Ryan saved the final test logs, his fingers lingering briefly on the keyboard. All right, he said, standing. Take 30. Then we start isolating edge cases. A collective murmur of relief spread through the room. Chairs shifted. Coffee cups were collected. Conversations started low, then rose into something resembling normalcy. Ryan didn't move right away. He stayed where he was, staring at the data. You're not going to admit I was right, are you? Elena's voice came from beside him. He glanced over. She was leaning slightly against the desk again, arms loosely folded, watching him with an expression that hovered somewhere between amusement and expectation. I'm going to say your theory had merit, he replied. She tilted her head. That's very generous of you. It's accurate. It's careful. I prefer precise. She smiled faintly. Same difference, depending on who you ask. Ryan frowned slightly. They're not equivalent. See? She said. Careful. He turned fully toward her now. Is there a point you're trying to make? Yes. He waited. She didn't fill the silence immediately. Instead, she glanced toward the rest of the team, now mostly dispersed, before returning her attention to him. You're very good at controlling things, she said. That's part of the job. It's part of how you live. His expression didn't change. Is this relevant to the project? Maybe. He crossed his arms again. Then connect it. Elena studied him for a moment, as if deciding something. You approached the bug like it was a technical failure, she said. And it is, but it's also behavioral. You kept trying to force consistency where the system needed adaptability. That's what we built it on. And that's why it broke when two users came together, she said. Because people aren't consistent. They're messy. They interrupt each other. They adjust. Ryan shrugged slightly. That's exactly why I don't design systems around them. Her smile sharpened just a bit. No, you design systems to avoid them. He felt a flicker of irritation. That's not what it is, she said gently, not unkindly, but firmly enough to interrupt him. He stopped, not because he agreed, but because he didn't immediately know how to refute it without overcommitting to a conversation he didn't want to have. Elena seemed to recognize that. Look, she said, her tone softening. I'm not criticizing you. Your system is incredible. The foundation you built, that's why this works at all. Ryan studied her, searching for any hint of condescension. He didn't find it. Then what's your point? He asked. My point is that sometimes the problem isn't the code, she said. It's the assumptions behind it. He exhaled slowly. And you think my assumptions are wrong. I think they're incomplete. That's a polite way of saying wrong. She laughed lightly. You said it, not me. For some reason that almost made him smile. Almost. A brief silence settled between them, less tense now. So, she said, pushing off the desk slightly. What's next? Edge cases, Ryan replied automatically. Stress testing. If the solution holds under pressure, we refine it. And if it doesn't, then we figure out why. She nodded once. Good answer. He hesitated. Why did you transfer? He asked. The question seemed to catch her a little off guard. Not because it was difficult, but because it wasn't what she'd expected from him. Elena folded her arms loosely again, considering. Because this project matters, she said. If it works, it changes how people experience virtual environments. Not just games, communication, collaboration, connection. Ryan watched her carefully. And you wanted to be part of that. Yes, that's it. She met his gaze directly. Isn't that enough? For a moment, he thought about all the reasons he'd thrown himself into work. The structure, the predictability, the payoff. It's efficient, he said. Elena shook her head, smiling faintly. You measure everything like that. Because it works. Does it? The question lingered longer than it should have. Ryan looked away first, focusing on a nearby monitor that no longer displayed anything relevant. We should get back to work, he said. Elena didn't push further. Sure, she said easily. Lead the way. As the team slowly filtered back into the room, the energy had shifted. There was momentum now. Not just the steady, grinding kind Ryan was used to, but something sharper, more alive. Hope, maybe. He wasn't entirely comfortable with it. Hope introduced variables. Variables introduced risk. And risk, he pushed the thought aside, stepping back into his role with practiced precision. All right, he said, addressing the team. Let's break this thing properly. As they dove back into testing, Ryan couldn't help but notice how often his attention drifted. Just slightly toward Elena. Not enough to disrupt his work. Not enough to matter. But enough to be noticeable. And that, more than anything else that day, felt like a problem he didn't yet know how to solve. Chapter 3 System Lag. The office had a different rhythm after midnight. During the day, it pulsed with conversation. Chairs rolling, keyboards clacking, voices overlapping in bursts of urgency or quiet debate. But at night, everything softened. Lights dimmed. Sound receded. What remained was a low, steady hum of machines doing exactly what they were designed to do. Ryan preferred it this way. He sat alone at his desk, sleeves rolled, tie abandoned hours ago, staring at a diagnostic trace that refused to behave. The earlier success with Elena's behavioral prioritization model had carried them through most of the day, but by early evening, the cracks had started to show. Not immediately, not cleanly. That would have been easier. Instead, the system degraded under sustained load in ways that didn't follow a predictable pattern. It didn't crash outright. It hesitated, stuttered, recovered. Then, without warning, slipped into the same latency spiral they'd been fighting for weeks. Unreliable improvement. In Ryan's experience, that was sometimes worse than no improvement at all. He leaned back slightly, rubbing the bridge of his nose as lines of code blurred together on the screen. They'd increased adaptability, but at a cost. Too much adaptability, and the system lost cohesion. Too little, and it locked into conflict again. It was a balance he couldn't quite define. You know, most people go home at some point. Ryan didn't jump, but he did blink, the tension in his shoulders shifting as he recognized the voice. Elena. She stepped into the edge of his peripheral vision, holding 2 cups of coffee. One she placed beside him without asking. He glanced at it briefly. You're still here. So are you. That's different. She arched an eyebrow. Is it? Yes, he said simply. I'm supposed to be here. And I'm not. He gestured vaguely toward the rest of the empty room. The team's gone. The team needed rest, she replied. You need rest too. He picked up the coffee, taking a small sip before responding. I'll rest when this stabilizes. Elena pulled over a nearby chair, spinning it around before straddling it casually, arms resting along the back. That's not how that works. It is for me. She studied him for a moment, her expression considering, but didn't press. Instead, her gaze shifted to his monitor. What's it doing now? Ryan exhaled slowly. Behavioral negotiation holds for short bursts, then destabilizes under sustained interaction. Too many variables stacking on each other? Yes, but not in a linear way, he said, tapping a section of code. The system adapts so much that it starts overcorrecting. Elena leaned forward slightly, like 2 people trying too hard to agree. Ryan gave her a sidelong glance. We're not talking about people. We are, just with cleaner logic. He shook his head, but there was less resistance in the gesture this time. It shouldn't be this unstable. Something's missing, she said quietly. I know that. No, she replied softer now. I mean conceptually, not just technically. Ryan leaned back again, turning slightly to face her more directly. Then what is it? Elena didn't answer immediately. Instead, she watched the scrolling data again, eyes narrowing slightly as if tracing something invisible. You're letting the AIs adapt to each other, she said slowly. But you're still anchoring them too rigidly to their users. That's the whole point, Ryan said. They're user-driven systems, right? She agreed. But what happens when 2 users want different things at the same time? They compromise. Do they? She asked. He paused. In theory. In reality? She pressed. They negotiate. And negotiation requires trust, she said. Ryan frowned. AIs don't trust. No, Elena said. But they can simulate the behavior that comes from trust. He considered that. How? She hesitated again, then shrugged lightly. By allowing incomplete information. Ryan's brow furrowed immediately. That's a terrible idea. She smiled faintly. See? Control. It's not about control, he said, sitting up straighter. It's about accuracy. The system needs full data to make optimal decisions. And that's exactly the problem, she said. He stared at her. You're trying to make every decision optimal, Elena continued. But real interactions aren't optimal, they're efficient enough. People act on partial information all the time. That's inefficient. That's human, she replied. Ryan pushed his chair back slightly, standing. We're not building a simulation of flawed human behavior. We're building a functional product. And if it doesn't feel real, people won't use it, she said evenly. It's not about feeling. It is, she interrupted gently but firmly. The word hung there, heavier than he expected. Ryan exhaled sharply, turning away for a moment. Even if you're right, implementing that would introduce risk. Yes. And instability. At first. And unpredictability. She smiled again, softer this time. You really don't like that word. No, he said. I don't. Elena stood, stepping closer but not too close. Close enough that he could feel her presence without it crowding him. You've built something incredible, she said. But you're trying to control every outcome. At some point, you have to let the system breathe. Ryan let out a quiet, almost humorless sound. Systems don't breathe. Yours kind of does, she said, gesturing at the screen. Look at it. He did. Lines of logic weaving together, diverging, reconnecting. A network of decisions being made in real time. Patterns forming, dissolving, forming again. It wasn't breathing, but it wasn't entirely static either. I don't like leaving things unresolved, he said after a moment. Elena nodded as if she'd expected that. I figured. He glanced at her. You figured that from a day of working with me? I figured that from the way you refuse to leave your desk, she replied lightly. And the way you treat uncertainty like a problem instead of a condition. Ryan considered that, then shook his head. Uncertainty is a problem. Not always. For this project, it is. For this project, she conceded. But maybe the solution isn't removing uncertainty. Maybe it's teaching the system how to handle it. He didn't respond right away. Instead, he looked back at the code. There was a path there. Possibility. Not clean. Not precise. But maybe workable. If we introduce partial data weighting, he said slowly, we'd need a failsafe. Of course. Something that prevents the system from spiraling when the assumptions are wrong. Elena nodded, a hint of excitement flickering in her eyes. A correction loop. Yes. But not too aggressive, she added. Or you'll end up back where you started. He allowed himself a small breath out through his nose. You're not making this easier. I'm not trying to, she said. I'm trying to make it better. Ryan looked at her again. There it was, that certainty. Not loud. Not forceful. Just steady. You're very comfortable with risk, he said. I'm comfortable with change. That's not the same thing. It overlaps, she replied. He hesitated, then asked, what makes you so sure this will work? Elena crossed her arms loosely, considering his question more seriously this time. I'm not sure, she said. Ryan blinked. You've been arguing for it all day. Yes, she said simply. Because it has a higher chance of working than what you were doing before. That's not the same as being confident. It is for me. He studied her, trying to reconcile that answer with everything else he'd seen. You're okay with not knowing, he said. She met his gaze. Aren't you? No. That answer came faster than he intended. Elena's expression softened just slightly. That sounds exhausting, she said. Ryan gave a short, quiet laugh. You have no idea. Another silence followed, but this one felt different. Not heavy, not tense, just present. Elena glanced at the screen again, then back at him. We should test it. We should prototype it first, he corrected. She smiled. Careful. Precise. Right? Ryan turned back to his workstation, already pulling up a new framework. For the next hour, they worked side by side. Not in perfect sync, but close. Ideas passed between them, sometimes smoothly, sometimes with friction, but always moving forward. Ryan handled the structural logic, anchoring the system so it wouldn't collapse under the weight of its new flexibility. Elena adjusted the behavioral layers, introducing nuance where he would have enforced rules. At one point, their hands brushed briefly as they both reached for the same input device. Ryan pulled back almost immediately. Sorry. Elena didn't move away as quickly. It's fine. He nodded once, refocusing on the screen. But his thoughts didn't settle as easily this time, because the system wasn't the only thing operating under new variables. And somewhere between the quiet hum of the office and the steady rhythm of their shared work, Ryan realized something he wasn't entirely prepared to process. The problem wasn't just getting harder to solve. It was getting more interesting, and that, more than any instability in the code, might have been the most unpredictable element of all. Chapter 4 Voice Recognition Failure. By mid-morning, optimism had a measurable presence. Ryan wouldn't have admitted that out loud. He preferred data to emotion, but even he could feel it in the room. The team moved faster, spoke with less hesitation, and glanced toward the main display not with dread, but with expectation. The updated behavioral model had held longer under overnight testing than anything they'd built before. Not perfectly, not consistently, but enough to suggest they were, finally, moving in the right direction. And now they were about to prove it. Final check before live demo, Claire said, standing near the conference table with a tablet in hand. Board members dial in at 11. This is internal only, but it's still going to circulate. Ryan nodded once. We're ready enough. Enough isn't exactly comforting, Jared muttered from his chair. It's accurate, Ryan said. Elena leaned back beside him, arms crossed loosely. You could try optimistic. Just once. I prefer not to lie to myself, he replied. She smiled faintly. You'd be surprised how flexible optimism can be. Ryan didn't respond, his attention already shifting back to the system interface. All right, Priya said, clapping her hands lightly. Demo sequence loaded. Dual user VR test, full AI linkage, voice-only command input. Mark adjusted his headset, settling it more securely. Ready on my end. Jared mirrored him, already grinning. Let's make this pretty. Ryan stepped forward slightly, eyes scanning every panel. Remember, keep commands natural. Don't overstructure your language. Got it, Mark said. No weird edge case tests mid-demo, Ryan added, sharper this time. Jared raised a hand. Wouldn't dream of it. Elena leaned closer to Ryan, just enough for her voice to stay low. You trust them? I trust their competence, he said. That's not what I asked. He didn't answer. Claire tapped her screen. We're live in 30 seconds. The room tightened not with fear, but with focus. Ryan felt it settle into his shoulders, grounding him. In it, Priya said. The simulation sprang to life on the main display, the same valley from earlier, but now richer, deeper, enhanced with dynamic lighting that shifted subtly with the digital sun. Users active, Mark said, his voice now coming through the system's audio interface, layered with spatial depth. Linked, Jared added. Ryan's gaze locked onto the sync panel. Give it your first commands, he said. Mark moved forward. Scan area and highlight points of interest. The first AI responded immediately, overlaying faint markers across the landscape. Track nearest waypoint and establish route, Jared said. The second AI processed smoothly, trajectory lines appearing in tandem. No delay. Ryan felt something inside him loosen, just slightly. Maintain formation and monitor environmental threats, Mark continued. Set defensive parameters and alert on anomaly detection, Jared added. The avatars adjusted their positions, movement fluid, responses sharp. Priya smiled. Latencies stable. Elena tilted her head, watching closely. It's adapting. Ryan didn't take his eyes off the numbers. So far, so good. Layer more interaction, he said. Jared didn't hesitate. Open inventory and compare equipped gear. Mark followed, slightly overlapping. Check map and adjust heading for elevation advantage. There was a pause not long, just long enough to be noticeable. Ryan's jaw tightened. Correction loop engaged, Priya said quickly. Then the system recovered. Inventory displayed. Map updated. Movement resumed. Still holding, Mark said. Ryan nodded once. Push it. Jared grinned. You heard the man. Activate advanced combat stance and prepare ranged attack, he said. Identify threat vectors and reposition defensively, Mark layered in immediately. For a split second, the system hesitated again. Longer this time. The sync panel flickered, values spiking just above acceptable thresholds before settling. Elena leaned forward slightly. It's compensating too hard. Ryan's eyes narrowed. Correction loops overreaching. Should we dial it back? Priya asked. No, Ryan said quickly. Let it stabilize, the system stuttered. The avatars halted mid-motion. A delay ripple passed through the data streams like a fracture spreading under pressure. Jared said, voice no longer confident. That doesn't look good. Hold commands, Ryan said. Too late, Mark muttered. The audio cracked. Not fully breaking, but distorting just enough to shift from immersive to jarring. Words overlapped unnaturally. Recalculating. One AI looped faintly. Processing command. Conflict detected. The other echoed. Elena's voice cut in, sharper now. Ryan. I see it. The sync panel spiked again. Then dropped. Then spiked harder. The correction loop, meant to stabilize, was feeding back into itself. They're over-negotiating, she said. Too many adjustments at once. Ryan moved to the console, fingers flying across the keyboard. Manually dampening correction threshold. The system ignored it. Not completely, but enough. Command priority collapsing, Priya said, her voice tight. On screen, the avatars jerked, half-executed commands colliding visually. One stepped forward while simultaneously attempting to reposition backward. Kill voice input, Ryan said. Trying, Mark replied. It's not. The audio fractured again, overlapping, distorted, echoing like a conversation that had lost all coherence. Recalibrating, recall. The screen froze. Silence. Not the calm kind. The kind that followed something breaking. For a moment, no one spoke. Ryan stared at the display, still waiting, some part of him expecting recovery. It didn't come. Claire cleared her throat quietly. We're still live. Ryan's eyes closed briefly, then opened. End demo, he said. Priya terminated the simulation. The screen faded to black. The silence in the room shifted. Heavier now, but not chaotic. Controlled. Measured. Disappointment, but contained. Ryan exhaled slowly, straightening. Log everything, he said. Full system trace. I want every stage of the collapse documented. His voice was steady, almost calm. The team moved automatically, slipping back into procedure. But the energy was gone. Hope had narrowed into something sharper, pressure. Elena didn't move right away. She was still looking at the now dark display, her expression unreadable. That wasn't just instability, she said after a moment. Ryan didn't look at her. It was a failure in the correction loop. No, she said quietly. It was interference that got his attention. He turned. Explain. She met his gaze. The system didn't just overcorrect. It reacted to itself reacting. That's what a feedback loop is. No, she said again, firmer. This was layered. Like both AIs were anticipating each other's corrections and trying to adjust ahead of time. Ryan frowned. That doesn't make sense. It doesn't have to make sense to be happening, she replied. He ran a hand through his hair, pacing once across the floor. They shouldn't be predicting each other's behavior independently, he said. That's redundant processing. It should have been filtered out. Unless the trust model you added is causing overlap, Elena said. He stopped. The words landed harder than he expected. You think your solution broke it, he said. I think we both contributed, she replied evenly. Ryan's jaw tightened. The system was already unstable before, and now it's unstable in a different way, she said, not raising her voice, but not backing down either. The team fell quiet again, not because they were watching a conflict, but because they could feel something shifting underneath it. Ryan turned away, bracing his hands against the edge of the desk. For a moment he didn't speak, didn't move. Then, quietly, we were close. You still are, Elena said. He shook his head once. That wasn't close. That was a breakdown. It was a breakthrough wrapped in a breakdown, she corrected. That's not how this works, he said, sharper now. It is if you look at what failed instead of just that it failed. Ryan turned sharply. I am looking at what failed. Then stop treating it like something that needs to be eliminated entirely, she said. It needs to be understood. He stared at her, because part of him knew she was right, and part of him didn't want her to be. We don't have time for theory, he said. We don't have time to ignore it either, Elena replied. Another silence, thicker now, more personal. Ryan exhaled slowly, forcing his voice back into something controlled. We'll review the logs. She nodded once. Good. But neither of them moved immediately. The rest of the team resumed their work quietly, giving them space without being told to. Ryan finally looked away first. Take a break, he said, though he didn't sound like he meant it for himself. Elena studied him for a moment longer. Then softer. You don't have to solve it alone. He didn't respond, because that wasn't the problem. The problem was that he didn't know how not to. As Elena stepped away, Ryan turned back to the console, pulling up the raw data from the failed demo. Lines of code, streams of interaction, points where the system bent, then snapped. It wasn't just broken. It was conflicted. And for the first time since the project began, Ryan wasn't entirely sure whether fixing it meant tightening his control, or learning finally how to let go of it. Chapter 5, Patch Notes. Ryan lasted exactly 12 minutes after the failed demo before isolating himself. Not physically at first, he stayed in the office, stayed near the team, stayed within reach of the problem, but mentally, he retreated into the only space that had ever made sense to him. Clean logic, structured thought, variables he could isolate, test, and eliminate. Emotion didn't belong there. Failure, however, did. He stood at his workstation, replaying the demo logs frame by frame. Every stutter, every deviation, every moment where the system crossed from functional to fractured. There was a pattern. There had to be. Behind him, the room remained active, though quieter than before. Conversation carried a different tone now, less confident, more careful. Even Jared's usual humor had gone subdued, replaced with short comments and longer stretches of silence. Ryan tuned it all out. He adjusted parameters, reran slices of the failure sequence, simulated partial reconstructions of the collapse. Each time, he got closer to understanding it. Each time, it slipped just out of reach. Ryan. He ignored it. Ryan. Still nothing. A chair scraped softly behind him. Ryan. This time, Elena didn't stop at his name. She stepped into his space, not intrusively, but firmly enough that her presence couldn't be dismissed. He didn't turn. I'm working. I can see that. Then what do you need? She folded her arms. You to stop for a second. No. Came out sharper than he intended. Elena didn't flinch. You're not going to solve it like this, she said. Ryan finally turned, irritation breaking through the calm he'd been holding together. Then how, exactly, am I supposed to solve it? By stepping back long enough to understand it. I do understand it, he said. There's a conflict in the prediction layers feeding into the correction loop, causing recursive overcompensation. Technically, she said, that's the only way that matters. No, she replied quietly. It's the easiest way to ignore the rest. Ryan exhaled sharply. We don't have time for philosophical debates. This isn't philosophical, she said. It's practical. He shook his head, turning back toward his screens. Then be practical. Eliminate the assumption that the system needs perfect alignment. His hands stilled on the keyboard. I already did that, he said. No, Elena said. You loosened it. You didn't let it go. Ryan turned again, slower this time. If I let go, the system collapses. It already collapsed, she said gently. That landed harder than anything else she'd said. For a moment, he didn't respond. You're trying to control the outcome after it starts breaking, she continued. But the problem happens before that, when both AIs try to anticipate each other too much. That's what makes it adaptive. That's what makes it unstable, she corrected. Ryan walked a few steps away, running a hand through his hair. So what? Just remove prediction entirely? No, she said. Limit it. It's already limited. Not enough. He stopped pacing, turning back toward her. Then define enough. Elena met his gaze evenly. I can't. Ryan laughed short and hollow. That's helpful. I can't give you a perfect number, she said. That's your part. And your part is what exactly? He asked. To tell you that you're overcorrecting for something that isn't the real problem. He crossed his arms. Then what is? She hesitated. That, more than anything else, caught his attention. Elena Morales, the one person in the room who spoke with quiet certainty about everything, was hesitating. It's not just the system, she said finally. Ryan's expression tightened. We're not doing this. We already are, she replied. I don't need a lecture. Good. Because I'm not giving one. Then say what you need to say or let me work. She took a breath. Not frustrated, not defensive. Just steady. You don't trust the system, she said. That's not true. You don't, she insisted. You don't trust it to fail and recover on its own. It didn't recover. Because you didn't design it to, she said. Ryan's jaw tightened. That's not how systems work. That's not how you want them to work, she countered. He took a step toward her. And how do you want them to work? Based on hope? Guesswork? Unpredictable behavior? Based on resilience, she said. The word lingered. Ryan frowned. Resilience requires stability. It requires flexibility, Elena replied. The ability to bend without breaking. That's exactly what we tried to do. And then you locked it back down with a correction loop that forced it into perfect alignment again, she said. He opened his mouth, then stopped, because he knew she wasn't entirely wrong. The correction loop he'd insisted on had been designed as a safeguard, but it had also been rigid, controlled, predictable, exactly the way he liked things. You're saying I broke it, he said quietly. I'm saying you tried to protect it the wrong way, she answered just as softly. He looked away, jaw tight. That solution could work, she continued. But not if you treat every deviation like an error that needs to be fixed immediately. That's what errors are. No, she said. Some deviations are part of the process. Ryan shook his head. You're asking me to leave problems unresolved. I'm asking you to let the system learn which problems matter. That's not guaranteed. Neither is anything else we're doing, she said. Silence settled again. But this time it wasn't tense. It was exposed. Ryan leaned back against the desk, staring down at the floor for a moment. When I was 23, he said suddenly, his voice quieter than before, I made a series of decisions that were inefficient. Elena didn't interrupt. I thought I knew what I was doing, he continued. I thought I could manage outcomes, control risks, make the right moves if I just paid attention. He let out a faint, humorless breath. I was wrong. Elena watched him carefully. I lost time, he said. Money, opportunities, relationships, because I kept thinking the next decision would fix the last one. Her voice softened. That sounds familiar. Ryan glanced at her briefly, then back to the floor. So I stopped, he said. I removed the variables, focused on what I could control. Work, results, measurable outcomes. And it worked, Elena said. Yes. And now? He hesitated. It still works, he said. But, she prompted gently. Ryan looked at the screen. The frozen remnants of the failed demo still etched into his mind. But it's not enough here, he admitted. Elena's expression shifted just slightly. Not triumph. Understanding. The system isn't failing because you're wrong, she said. It's failing because it's incomplete. He nodded slowly. You said that before. I meant it. Another pause. Then carefully. So what does a complete version look like? He asked. Elena smiled faintly. Messier. Ryan let out a breath that almost sounded like a laugh. Of course it does. But stronger, she added. He looked at her. And harder to predict, she said. I hate that. I know. A small silence followed. Then Ryan pushed himself off the desk, stepping back toward his workstation. All right, he said. Elena tilted her head slightly. All right. We redesigned the correction loop. Her eyes lit slightly. Yeah. It needs to allow controlled deviation, he continued. Not force immediate correction. And limit predictive overlap, she added. Yes. He glanced at her again. But we set boundaries. Of course. He nodded once. And we test aggressively. Obviously. A faint smile touched his expression. Barely there, but real. You're not going to make this easy, are you? He said. Elena smiled back. Not a chance. For the first time since the demo failed, something shifted. Not hope. Not yet. But direction. Ryan turned fully back to the system, pulling up a fresh framework. His fingers moved faster now. Not because he was rushing, but because he knew where he was going. Not perfectly, but enough. Elena stepped beside him, already scanning through the code. Start with the thresholds, she said. I am. And don't anchor them to static values. I won't. She watched him for a moment, then nodded. Good. They worked together again. Not in perfect agreement, but closer than before. And somewhere between the lines of rewritten logic and restructured behavior, Ryan realized something that felt both deeply uncomfortable and unexpectedly right. Letting go didn't mean losing control. It meant choosing where control actually mattered. And that, for the first time in a long time, felt like a change worth risking. Chapter 6: Full Immersion. By late afternoon, the office had narrowed into something focused and intense again. But this time, the energy wasn't brittle. It had weight, yes, consequences, pressure. But underneath all of it, there was a sense of forward motion that hadn't been there before. Ryan noticed the difference immediately, not because anyone said it out loud, but because the team wasn't hesitating anymore. All right, he said, standing near the center of the room with a tablet in hand. New correction model is integrated. Predictive overlap capped dynamically, not statically. Adaptive weighting is active, but it can't exceed the threshold window we set. Priya nodded. Which means if both AIs try to overpredict, the system forces a natural resolution instead of looping. Exactly, Ryan said. Jared stretched in his chair. So the system basically learns when to stop trying so hard. Elena, leaning against the desk across from Ryan, smiled. That's one way to put it. Mark picked up one of the VR headsets, turning it in his hands. And you want to test this live again? Ryan hesitated only for a second. Yes. The room quieted just slightly. Claire glanced up from her notes. Internal test? Ryan shook his head. Immersive. That got everyone's attention. Elena's posture shifted, curiosity sharpening into focus. You're serious? If we're going to validate full interaction, we test it the way users will experience it, Ryan said. Not just external simulation. Jared let out a low whistle. You always jump straight to the fun part, don't you? This isn't fun, Ryan replied automatically. Elena raised an eyebrow. You're about to step into your own virtual world and test a system you just rebuilt from the ground up. He glanced at her. That's work. That's your definition of work, she said lightly. He ignored that, turning back to the team. I'll run one instance, he said. Elena, you'll run the other. She blinked once, just enough to show she hadn't expected that. Me? You understand the behavioral model better than anyone else here, Ryan said. We need accurate input. Pause. Then Elena nodded slowly. All right. Priya, monitor system integrity, Ryan continued. Mark, Jared, observe and log deviations. No intervention unless we call it. Got it, Priya said. Ryan picked up a headset. For a moment he just held it. This was different. He'd tested systems before. Dozens of them. Hundreds if he counted early work. But this, which they had built together, reshaped after failure, reimagined with risk, felt less like testing code and more like stepping into something that hadn't quite decided what it wanted to be yet. Beside him, Elena picked up her headset too. You're overthinking it, she said quietly. I'm assessing variables. You're hesitating. He glanced at her. I'm not. A small smile tugged at her mouth. Careful. Ryan exhaled once. Ready. Always, she said. They put the headsets on. The world came alive around them. Ryan stood at the edge of the now familiar valley, but it didn't feel like a display anymore. It felt present. The air moved. Sound carried with depth and subtlety. Light shifted across surfaces with the kind of realism that made distance difficult to gauge. He moved his head slightly. The system tracked perfectly. Audio sync confirmed. Priya's voice echoed faintly in the background, separated just enough to remind him of the real world. Then, Ryan. He turned. Elena stood several feet away, her avatar rendered with high fidelity. Not perfectly lifelike, but close enough that the movement felt natural. Her voice, through the system, was clear. Closer than before. Fuller. As if she were actually standing there. Audio depth is holding, he said. I can hear the difference, she replied. It's clearer. Ryan nodded once, though he doubted she could see the gesture as clearly as he felt it. Let's start simple, he said. Basic movement and environment scan. Elena tilted her head, a faint smile in her voice. Always cautious. Always structured. Right? She looked out over the valley. Scan terrain and identify elevation points. Markers appeared across the landscape. Ryan followed. Map nearest route and track environmental variables. The system responded cleanly, no delay, no hesitation. He felt it. Not just the absence of error, but the presence of flow. Layer commands, Elena said. Ryan didn't hesitate. Advance position and monitor movement patterns. Adjust path dynamically and prioritize safe traversal, she added. For a fraction of a second, he watched the sync panel in his peripheral interface, then forced himself to look away. Trust it, he thought. The avatars moved. Not perfectly in unison, not forced, but coordinated enough that it felt intentional. Flexible. Alive. Elena took a few steps forward, scanning the environment. It's adapting. Ryan nodded. Correction loop hasn't triggered yet. That's good, she said. It means we haven't stressed it enough. She laughed softly. Of course that's your takeaway. He glanced at her. We need to push it. Then let's push it. There was something different in her tone this time. Not just professional. Challenging. Ryan stepped closer, adjusting his position. Simulate conflict. Elena's eyes flicked toward him. Direct conflict? She asked. Yes. All right, she said. She turned back to the landscape. Set path to lower valley and increase speed. Ryan immediately followed. Override path. Shift to the ridge above and reduce speed for stability. The system paused. Longer than before. Ryan felt it, a flicker of tension in the delay. Then the avatars adjusted. Not abruptly. Not rigidly. They split movement slightly, balancing trajectory between both commands. Interesting, Elena said quietly. It's compromising. Not fully one or the other, Ryan added. Just enough to satisfy both. He nodded. Measured deviation. She glanced at him, something softer in her expression. See? Not all uncertainty is a problem. Ryan held her gaze for a moment. This isn't uncertain, he said. This is controlled uncertainty. She smiled faintly. That still counts. He didn't respond right away, because for the first time he wasn't sure how much the distinction mattered. They continued moving, testing, layering input, shifting commands, introducing small complexities. The system held. Not perfectly, but consistently, and for once that was enough. After a longer stretch of silence than usual, Elena slowed her movement, turning toward him fully. Can I try something? She asked. Ryan hesitated. Depends. She tilted her head slightly. Trust me. The question landed before he could deflect it. Within reasonable parameters, he said. She laughed softly. Of course. Then she turned slightly, her voice steady. Link contextual priority to emotional inference layer. Ryan blinked. We didn't fully stabilize that. Just watch, she said. The system responded, but more slowly than before. Ryan stiffened slightly. Elena, relax. I'm not. You are, she said lightly. Give it a second. He forced himself to stay still. The data flickered, shifted, then stilled. The system adjusted. Not sharply, not rigidly, but with a kind of subtle awareness that hadn't been present before. Ryan frowned slightly. What did you just do? I gave the system permission to care which command mattered more, she said. That's not a measurable variable. It is now. He studied the interface carefully. The prioritization layer had changed not by hard values, but by weighted interpretation. It wasn't guessing. It was choosing. This could destabilize under pressure, he said. It could, she agreed. But it's working now. He looked at her again. The valley stretched around them, quiet, open, full of possibility. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Elena stepped a little closer. Close enough that their avatars stood within comfortable proximity. Not forced, not distant. This is what it's supposed to feel like, she said quietly. Ryan glanced around. The system, the motion, the connection. It does feel better, he admitted. She looked at him, not at the system. At some point, she said, you have to let things exist without analyzing every second of them. Ryan almost responded automatically, almost dismissed it, but something stopped him. Instead, he exhaled slowly. For how long? He asked. Elena smiled. Long enough to see what happens next. For once, Ryan didn't argue. He didn't check the data. He didn't adjust the system. He just stood there, for a few seconds longer than he normally would have allowed, letting the world exist without trying to control it. And somewhere in that stillness, something shifted. Not dramatically, not all at once, but enough. Enough that, when he finally spoke again, his voice had lost a fraction of its usual edge. We should run one more stress sequence, he said. Elena laughed softly. Of course we should. But this time there was no tension in it. Only momentum, and maybe just a little anticipation. Chapter 7 Final Build, the system held. That was the first conclusion Ryan allowed himself to reach after the immersive test ended. Not perfectly, not indefinitely, but consistently enough that the failure from the previous demo now felt explainable instead of inevitable. And that difference mattered. It changed the way the team worked the next morning. Run it again, Ryan said, standing with his hands braced lightly against the back of a chair as the latest dataset streamed across the main display. Priya tapped in the command. Same parameters? No, Elena said from across the room. Add variable user hesitation. Ryan glanced at her. Define hesitation. She smiled faintly. Delayed input. Overlapping corrections. Second guessing. Jared leaned back in his chair. You mean like real people? Exactly like real people, she said. Ryan considered it for half a second, then nodded. Do it. Priya adjusted the parameters. Initializing, she said. The system spun up again, this time simulating two users who weren't decisive, who issued commands that overlapped, repeated, or contradicted themselves in small human ways. The kind of input Ryan had spent years trying to filter out. Now they leaned into it. Start sequence, he said. The simulation launched. Almost immediately, the difference was noticeable, not in performance but in behavior. The AIs didn't rush to correct conflict. They paused. Not long. Just enough. Look at that, Mark said quietly. It's not overreacting. Ryan watched the sync panel. Steady. Not flatlined into perfection but controlled. Sustained load test? Priya asked. Ryan nodded once. Push it. Minutes passed. The system adapted. No runaway loop. No catastrophic delay. Just movement. Adjustment. Progress. Elena let out a slow breath. That's it. Ryan didn't respond immediately, because he needed to be sure. Cycle it through heavy audio load, he said. Priya complied. Simulated voices layered in, conversation fragments, overlapping instructions, interruptions. The exact conditions that had broken everything before. This time the system held. Not rigidly, not cleanly, but correctly. Ryan exhaled through his nose, stepping back from the display. Stability threshold? He asked. Within acceptable range, Priya said. Across all layers. A beat. Then Jared broke the silence with a quiet, almost disbelieving laugh. Are we done? Ryan glanced at Elena. She met his gaze. Not smiling. Not celebrating yet. Just waiting. Run it again, Ryan said. They ran it 3 more times. Each pass slightly different. Each pass holding. By the 4th run, something shifted in the room. Restraint gave way to relief. Not loud. Not explosive. But real. Mark leaned back, covering his face briefly with his hands. Okay. That's okay. Yeah. Priya smiled openly this time. It's working. Jared spun once in his chair. I knew it would. You absolutely did not, Priya said, still grinning. He shrugged. I had a feeling. And I have logs that say otherwise, she shot back. Laughter broke through the tension that had been building for weeks. Ryan stayed where he was, watching the data settle into something final. Not perfect, but good. More than good. Enough. Claire stepped forward, her relief less contained than the rest. We can present this. This is production ready. Ryan nodded slowly. With refinement. Of course, she said quickly. But this gets approval. The words landed. Production approval. The next step. The result they had been working toward. Ryan looked around the room. At the team. At the people who had pushed through the long hours, the failed prototypes, the quiet frustration. At Elena. She wasn't looking at the screens anymore. She was looking at him. Say it, Jared called from across the room. You're thinking it. Ryan exhaled. We're ready, he said. That was all it took. The room erupted. Not chaotic, not unprofessional, but undeniably energized. Chairs shifted. People stood. Conversations overlapped, brighter now, lighter. Even Ryan felt it. Not as noise, but as release. He let himself take one step away from the system. Then another. Elena crossed the room toward him, stopping just within conversational distance. You didn't argue that one too hard, she said lightly. We're within tolerance thresholds, he replied. She smiled. Still careful. Still precise, right? A brief pause. Then she nodded toward the team. You did this, you know? Ryan shook his head immediately. We did. I meant the structure, she said. The foundation. Without that, none of this works. And without your changes, it still doesn't, he countered. She tilted her head slightly. You're getting better at that. At what? Sharing credit. He almost deflected it. Almost turned it into something technical. But instead, I had to learn, he said. Elena's expression softened. Just slightly. Looks like it paid off. Ryan glanced around the room again. Team members who had been stressed, distracted, uncertain now standing taller, laughing, already talking about next steps, future possibilities. They deserved it, he said quietly. So did you. The words caught him off guard. He looked back at her. That's not. He stopped. That's not how I think about it. I know, she said gently. A brief silence followed. Then Claire's voice cut across the room. We'll need a presentation deck finalized by tomorrow morning. Ryan nodded automatically. I'll handle it. Elena raised an eyebrow. We'll handle it. He hesitated. Then nodded. We'll handle it. Claire smiled. Good. Board meeting is scheduled for Monday. Monday. A deadline. A clear next step. Ryan felt the familiar structure settle around him again. But this time, it didn't feel restrictive. Felt earned. As the team began gathering their things, conversations breaking into smaller groups, Elena lingered beside him. Hey, she said. He turned. Yeah. I got an email this morning. Something in her tone shifted. Subtle, but noticeable. Ryan straightened slightly. About a position, she said. Back in the behavioral AI division. He watched her carefully. You already work there. This is different, she said. Lead role. New project. Big one. Ryan felt something tighten. Not sharply, not painfully. Just enough to register. That's good, he said. It is. Silence. Are you taking it? He asked. Elena hesitated. I haven't decided. Ryan nodded once, though the answer didn't settle anything. It's a good opportunity, he said. That's what everyone keeps saying. He glanced at her. And what do you say? She looked at him directly now. I say timing matters. Ryan's expression shifted slightly. What does that mean? It means, she said slowly, sometimes what looks right on paper isn't the full picture. He held her gaze. And sometimes it is, he said. She smiled faintly. There's your precision again. I'm being practical. I know. Another pause. Longer this time. Not awkward, but unfinished. I need to give them an answer soon, she said. Ryan nodded. Then you should. Her eyes searched his face, as if looking for something he wasn't offering. Not intentionally, just not there. Yeah, she said softly. I should. She turned slightly, taking a step back. I'll help with the presentation, she added, her tone lighter now. Good. Try to get some rest, Ryan. I will. She smiled like she didn't quite believe him. See you tomorrow. Yeah, he said. Tomorrow. She walked away. Ryan watched her go for a moment longer than necessary, then turned back to the screens. The system was stable. The project was ready. Everything was exactly where it was supposed to be. And yet, there was a variable now he hadn't accounted for. One he couldn't measure, couldn't optimize, couldn't solve with code. Ryan exhaled slowly, rubbing the back of his neck. For the first time since the project began, success didn't feel entirely complete. Because for the first time in a long time, he was facing something without a clear outcome. And worse, he wasn't entirely sure he wanted one. Because outcomes meant decisions, and decisions meant risk. And risk. Ryan stared at the dark reflection of the screen in front of him. For all the progress he'd made, this was a problem he still didn't know how to approach. Chapter 8 live release Monday arrived with the kind of clarity Ryan used to depend on. There was a schedule. There was a presentation outline. There were measurable outcomes and defined expectations. The board would review, ask questions, analyze performance metrics, and, if everything held, approve the transition to production. It was the kind of environment Ryan operated best in. Predictable, structured, controlled. And yet, as he stood in the conference room adjusting the final slide deck, something felt slightly off. Not wrong, just unresolved. Third time you've adjusted that slide. Elena's voice came from behind him, light but precise. Ryan didn't turn immediately. I'm refining it. It's already refined. Now it's more refined. She stepped closer, glancing at the screen. You've moved the same graph 3 pixels to the left. 4, he corrected. Elena smiled faintly. Of course. Ryan exhaled quietly, stepping back. Everything needs to be exact. Everything already is exact, she said. You saw the results. I saw stable tests, he replied. That's not the same as final performance. It's as close as we're going to get before launch. He hesitated, because she was right, and because that didn't eliminate the feeling that something was still undefined. You okay? She asked softly. Ryan glanced at her, then away. I don't like variables I can't control. Elena crossed her arms loosely. You've been saying that all week, and it hasn't changed. She studied him for a moment. No, you have. He frowned slightly. That's debatable. Not really, she said. A week ago, you wouldn't have even tried this approach. I didn't have the right framework. You didn't have the willingness, she corrected gently. Ryan opened his mouth to respond, then stopped. Because again, she wasn't wrong. A quiet knock interrupted them. Claire stepped in, tablet in hand. Board members are ready. Ryan nodded once. We're set. Good, she said. This is it. It was. Ryan picked up the presentation remote, his grip steadier than he felt. Elena moved to stand beside him. Not too close, not distant. Balanced. Ready? She asked quietly. Ryan looked at her. For a second longer than necessary. Then nodded. Yeah. The presentation began exactly as planned. Ryan led the technical overview, system architecture, performance benchmarks, integration methodology. His voice was steady, controlled, precise in the way it always was during high-stakes moments. He didn't rush. He didn't over-explain. He trusted the work. Halfway through, Elena stepped in seamlessly, guiding the discussion into behavioral modeling and user experience design. Where Ryan was structured, she was fluid. Where he emphasized stability, she emphasized adaptability. Together, they didn't overlap. They complemented. The board asked questions. Sharp ones. Expected ones. Ryan answered with data. Elena answered with perspective. At one point, a board member leaned forward. Your system allows for variable prioritization based on incomplete data. How do you ensure it remains reliable under unpredictable conditions? Ryan opened his mouth, then hesitated. Because a week ago, his answer would have been absolute. Rigid. Controlled. Now, he glanced briefly at Elena. She didn't speak. Didn't step in. But she didn't need to. Ryan turned back to the board. We don't eliminate unpredictability, he said. We manage how the system responds to it. Pause. Then he continued. The system isn't designed to force perfect alignment. It's designed to remain functional when alignment isn't possible. That's what makes it reliable. Silence followed. Not skepticism. Consideration. Then, a slow nod from the board member. That's a meaningful distinction. Ryan inclined his head slightly. Yes, it is. The rest of the presentation flowed. And when it ended, approval didn't come with fanfare. Came with quiet agreement. Clear direction. Forward movement. Proceed to production phase. Claire read from her tablet, unable to hide the satisfaction in her voice. It was done. The room began to clear, board members departing, conversations shifting toward logistics and timelines. Ryan stood still for a moment longer, then exhaled. Not sharply, not heavily, but fully. Elena stepped beside him again. You did it, she said. We did, he corrected. She smiled. Fair. A brief pause. Then, I gave them my answer, she said. Ryan's breath hitched, just slightly. He turned. And, Elena held his gaze. I turned it down. The words settled slowly. You turned down the lead role, he repeated. Yes. Why? Came out more direct than he intended. Elena didn't seem surprised. Because I wasn't done here yet, she said. Ryan frowned slightly. The project's moving to production. You could have led something new. I could have, she agreed. But that's not the only thing that matters. He studied her. What else matters? He asked. Elena tilted her head slightly, her expression softer now. Timing, she said. Context, the people you're working with. Ryan looked away briefly, then back. That's not measurable, he said. No, she replied. It isn't. Another silence stretched between them. Not uncomfortable, but significant. Ryan shifted slightly, running a hand over the back of his neck. There's something I've been thinking about, he said. Elena didn't interrupt, didn't rush him. If this project had failed, he continued, I would have known exactly what to do. She blinked. You would have. Yes, he said. Fix it. Rebuild it. Move on. And now? She asked. Ryan hesitated. Then, more quietly, I don't know what to do now. Elena smiled faintly. That's new. I don't like it. I know. He let out a small breath. I've spent years making sure I always had a clear outcome, a direction, a next step. And right now, he met her gaze. Right now feels open. Elena nodded slowly. That's not a bad thing. It is if I don't know what to do with it. She stepped a little closer. Not enough to overwhelm, just enough to be present. You don't have to decide everything at once, she said. Ryan huffed a quiet laugh. That's not how I work. I know, she said. But maybe it's how you start. He looked at her. Really looked. Not as a colleague. Not as a collaborator. But as the person who had stepped into his carefully structured world and, without breaking it, changed how it worked. You said timing matters, he said. I did. And context. Yes. And people. Elena's smile softened. Yes. Ryan exhaled slowly. Then, would you want to get dinner? The question landed between them with a quiet weight. Not dramatic. Not complicated. But real. Elena didn't answer immediately. Not because she needed to think, but because she seemed to be giving the moment the space it deserved. Then she smiled. Not sharp. Not teasing. Just warm. I was wondering how long that would take, she said. Ryan blinked. So that's a yes? That's a yes. Something in his chest loosened. Unexpected. Unfamiliar. But not unwelcome. Okay, he said. Good. Elena laughed softly. You're still very precise. I'm working on it. She said. I can tell. They stood there for a moment longer. The project finalized. The system ready. The future unwritten. And for once, Ryan didn't feel the need to define it immediately. Let's go, Elena said, turning toward the door. Ryan followed. Not because it was planned. Not because it was calculated. But because it felt like the right next step. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough. Chapter 9 Open Variables. Dinner turned out to be less structured than anything Ryan was used to, and somehow that felt appropriate. He had suggested a place near the office out of habit. Efficient, accessible, predictable. Elena had taken one look at the suggestion on his phone, tilted her head and said, we can do better than that. Now they were 3 neighborhoods away, seated at a small restaurant Ryan wouldn't have found on his own, surrounded by dim lighting, quiet conversation, and a kind of atmosphere that didn't lend itself to analysis. He noticed that immediately. This wasn't in your original plan, was it? Elena asked, setting down her menu. Ryan glanced around once more before answering. No. And yet, here you are. Yes. She smiled. You're adapting. I'm tolerating deviation, he corrected. Same thing, she said lightly. It's not, he replied automatically, then paused. Actually, it might be closer than I want it to be. Elena laughed softly. The sound settled easily between them. Unhurried. Unforced. Ryan picked up his menu, scanning it with quiet focus. Not because he needed to, but because it gave him a second to recalibrate. This was different. Not a meeting. not a structured interaction. No agenda. No defined outcome. He wasn't entirely sure what the correct approach was. So, Elena said, resting her elbows lightly on the table, what does Ryan Davis do when he's not saving impossible projects? He glanced up. That doesn't happen often. Not surprising, she said. But that wasn't what I asked. Ryan considered the question. Work had always filled the space. Not just practically, but deliberately. There's not a lot outside of it, he admitted. Elena didn't react immediately. No pity. No surprise. Just attention. That used to work for you, she said. It still does, he replied. But not entirely. He exhaled. A quiet acknowledgement. Not entirely. She nodded once, as if fitting that answer into something she already understood. Then maybe it's time to expand the system, she said. Ryan almost smiled. You're still using project metaphors. They're effective, she replied. They are, he admitted. A server approached, interrupting lightly. They placed their orders, Elena choosing without hesitation, Ryan taking just a moment longer before doing the same. When the server left, the silence between them returned, but it didn't feel empty. Ryan studied her for a moment. You weren't going to tell me about the offer, he said. Elena tilted her head slightly. I was. Eventually. That wasn't eventually. That was after the project was almost done. I wanted to finish this first, she said simply. That doesn't explain why you didn't mention it sooner. She met his gaze directly. I didn't want it to affect how you treated me on the team. Ryan frowned slightly. It wouldn't have. Maybe not intentionally, she said. But you manage outcomes, Ryan. You adjust variables. He considered that. That's fair, he admitted. A small smile touched her expression. I try to be. The conversation shifted again, naturally this time. Work came up, but not in the same all-consuming way. They talked about small details, decisions they'd made, moments that had almost gone unnoticed at the time. Jared's completely unnecessary commentary during testing. Priya's quiet persistence when the data didn't match expectations. The way Mark had stopped complaining halfway through the final sprint. Something neither of them had commented on until now. Ryan listened and spoke, more than he expected. And somewhere along the way, he realized something subtle but undeniable. He wasn't managing this. He wasn't optimizing responses. He wasn't calculating next steps. He was just there, present, engaged, unfiltered in a way that felt unfamiliar but not uncomfortable. That one surprised me, Elena said at one point. What? That you asked me to join the immersive test. Ryan leaned back slightly. It made sense. No, she said, shaking her head faintly. It wasn't just that. He frowned. It was the most efficient decision. Elena gave him a look. All right, he admitted. It wasn't only that. Progress, she said. Ryan huffed a quiet laugh. You track that carefully. Someone has to, she replied. Their food arrived, conversation pausing briefly as plates were set down. Ryan glanced at his, then at hers, then back at his. What? She asked, noticing. I almost ordered that, he said. Elena smiled. Next time. The words settled there. Next time. Ryan felt it. A small shift, barely noticeable but distinct. He didn't analyze it. This time he just let it sit. They ate, conversation weaving in and out of light topics and quieter ones. Not forced, not guided, just steady. After a while, Elena set her fork down, studying him again. You're quieter than before, she said. Ryan nodded slightly. I don't feel the need to fill space. That's new. Yes. Do you like it? He considered. I don't dislike it. I'll take that, she said. He looked at her. And you? He asked. Are you always like this? Like what? Comfortable with uncertainty. Elena leaned back slightly, folding her hands together. No, she said. I just got used to it. How? She smiled faintly. By not trying to eliminate it all the time. Ryan shook his head slightly. You make it sound easy. It's not, she said. It just gets less uncomfortable. He nodded, absorbing that. There was a pause longer than most they'd had. Not awkward, not tense, just reflective. Then Ryan spoke more quietly this time. I've spent a long time avoiding things that didn't have clear outcomes. Elena didn't interrupt. I thought that was the right way to move forward, he continued. Remove risk, focus on what works. And now? She asked gently. Ryan met her gaze. Now I think I was limiting the system too much. A smile curved at the edge of her mouth. That's a very you way to put that. It still applies, he said. It does, she agreed. He studied her for a moment. Does this feel like risk to you? He asked. Elena's expression softened. Yes, she said. Ryan nodded slowly. Good, he said. She blinked. Good. If it wasn't, it probably wouldn't matter as much. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Elena smiled, wider this time, warmer. That might be the most unguarded thing you've said all week. Ryan let out a quiet breath, not quite a laugh. I'm working on it. I can tell. The night stretched around them, not in a way that demanded more but in a way that allowed it. When they finally stepped outside, the air was cooler, the city quieter in that in-between hour where movement slows but doesn't stop. Ryan glanced up at the streetlights, then back at Elena. "So," he said, "what now?" She tilted her head slightly. "You want a defined next step?" He almost responded automatically, almost structured it. Instead, he paused. Then, "No," he said. "Not necessarily." Elena's smile returned, softer now. "Good answer." They started walking. No destination immediately set. No route mapped out. Just movement. And for once, Ryan didn't feel the need to calculate where it would lead. Because whatever came next, it didn't have to be fully defined to be worth continuing.